I'm Thomas. Hi, nice to meet you. I joined NETWAYS. You know NETWAYS? It's a nice company that assisted Puppet Labs to organize the conference or the camp here. I joined them in 2010 and, well, did a lot of stuff before. I'm originally from Italy, from South Tyrol. That's really in the north, in the middle of the Alps. So we speak something like German there. And usually I have to try to speak slowly and clear, but that's not a problem today because we do it in English. Oh, skip one slide, sorry. Well, I did my first Puppet steps quite some time ago with 24 something. Switched to 2.6 then very fast, and right now I'm using all kind of versions. Doing a lot of, well, talks like this and consultancy and Puppet trainings, and I have all certifications you can do, even the old ones that no longer exist. Yeah, and I'm always trying to export culture, so as an Italian citizen I felt perfectly, well, to be the right one to export Bavarian lifestyle to the USA, so I've been with the Lederhosen at the Puppet camp. That's it, yeah. Just a couple of slides to NETWAYS. I guess you all know who we are, a small open source company sitting in Nuremberg, about 40 people. We are the first German Puppet Labs partner, training partner. We're doing all their trainings, and you can hire us for consulting, for customizations, for workshops, everything. That's what we live from. Well, that's the link to the trainings. Since this year, there are new ones. You'll find everything online. So, back to this talk. Today we talk about certificates. I'll first start talking a little about certificates in general, then go on with Puppet certificates or how Puppet uses certificates, talk about Puppet's REST API or Puppet internals to give you some idea on how this works, how Puppet handles requests. Some ideas about distributed environments, about how to handle complicated CA structures. A couple of security issues we had and how to fix that and how to handle the whole life cycle for your certification authority. I will mention MCollective and other things, and well, that's it. Do you love your certificates and all that CA stuff? Really? All of you? Great. Is anyone here who already replaced all its certificates once and even the CA? Okay. Who is Puppet running for more than a year? What did you do with Heartbleed? We'll talk about this. So, ooh, lucky you. Perfect. Okay. Certificates are important. With just a small text file in a Puppet-driven environment, you're able to take over the whole environment, every server, everything. As if you are able to break into the configuration management, you own the whole company. So security is very important for Puppet, and that's something you should care about. If you're running Puppet Enterprise, that's a nice tool. Puppet Labs gives you. That's a new installer. Did you already use this one? Or try it out? Yeah? So you just click, you say, I want to have a splitted environment with nodes running, well, with Puppet running on different nodes to scale it out and so on. And it cares about, well, mostly everything. If then some kind of SSL bugs appear, then they give you a great assistance on how to fix this, but you're still on your own. So even with Puppet Enterprise, you should know what's going on under the hood. So Puppet Enterprise gives you a fantastic GUI, and with just a few clicks you're done and everything is running. You should still try to learn more about it, how it works internally, how it configures MCollective, and so on. Okay, certificates in general. What Puppet is using is a public key infrastructure. So that's just an environment where everybody has its own private key. You can use those keys to sign or encrypt messages. That's what Puppet does. And you can verify that the sender is who it says to be, and you can decrypt encrypted messages with a public key. So that's why they invented that system with those private and public keys, and yeah, that's it. There are different algorithms and so on. This is one picture I stole from Wikipedia. We see more or less all the rows involved. I, as the user, down here, have my private key, and I never give this one away. So this is just sitting on my box, on my server, in my pocket, wherever. And I asked the nice guy at the office where they handle my, where there the RA stands for request authority, if I'm not wrong. So they handle my request, and I tell them, hey, please sign my certificate, but I do not give them a private key, but just the public key. And they then put a stamp on it, they sign the certificate, and that's it. You get back the certificate file without giving your key to that certification authority or the registration authority. And then when you're going to use that key, in this example we see some nice website with a beautiful shop over there, nice Bermuda shorts. You use your key, and that shop can then go to a validation authority. That one just needs to have the public key of the certification authority, and then they can check whether your certificate has really been signed by that certification authority. That's how it works. So X.509 is the name of the standard, or one standard implementing an environment like this. And this standard describes how your Puppet public key infrastructure works. HTTPS is something you're using every day. That's exactly the same. Something like this happens with every HTTPS request. That's not kind of a web of trust. It's a strict hierarchy. That's how they, or X.509, defined that. And this has also an influence on how I can structure my certification authority. Yeah, it allows extensions. We'll talk about them later on. And that's it. The certificate itself each certificate has a distinguished name. So there's written who you are, has a serial number, has an issuer, so the certification authority that signed the certificate, and a validation. That's also very important. Certificates created by your Puppet master are going to expire. You should know about this before that happens. Yeah, the distinguished name is just a string. It's usually or often a DNS name. It could also be some custom string like CA:\Puppet master. Doesn't matter. But you should know what's written in there, or at least you should know about the name of your certification authority. There's also a thing called revocation list. So this allows me to invalidate certificates. In case someone breaks into a server, you can reinstall the server, but the guy that broke into the server may have stolen your certificate, your Puppet certificate, and this one allows him to fetch the whole configuration again. So if he has some chance to talk to your Puppet master, he can fetch the whole configuration for that node, database passwords, whatever. So in case you lose or you have the feeling that it could have been that someone stole a certificate, you should not only remove them, but also invalidate them. And this is done with the revocation list. Yeah, file name extensions. So generally, Puppet stores uses 3 extensions. It uses CSR for certification signing requests. PEM are the certificates themselves, and also for private keys, Puppet uses PEM as an extension. So I'll show you how you can distinguish them. But if you look in the file itself, they are plain text files. So by looking at the header, you immediately see what's going on, what kind of file this is. Okay, Puppet. A Puppet uses those standard certificates. If I'm going to install a fresh new Puppet, a new Puppet master, something like this, it generates my CA, it does everything. I can show you this live. This is just an old screenshot here. I copy and paste that code. Start the Puppet master, sorry. Better like this. I start the master. I do not demonize the master. I start it in verbose mode. I give it a custom SSL directory and some fictive cert name. And this is like an initial Puppet run. So it creates a new SSL key for my certification authority. It creates, that's just the private key of the certification authority. Then it creates a certificate signing request for the CA. It's signing the CA by itself, so it creates a request and signs the request with its own key. Then it creates a certificate revocation list. It also creates, that's something we do not see here, an inventory. So as a certification authority, you need to have an inventory because a revocation list revokes serial numbers and not keys. So if you want to revoke something, you have to still know who got which certificate or which serial number. That's just a plain text file on your Puppet master. Yeah, it then creates a new key for himself, and then once again does the same game, creates a certificate signing request. The new certification authority signs the request, and that's how we get our first certificate. And my Puppet run master is right now running in the foreground. Sorry, let's go back to the presentation. Where's my mouse? Here you go. Yeah, that's a screenshot of something. Oh, that's the directory structure. I could have shown you this also on the CLI. I see it created an inventory text file. It created a password for the private key. So the private key is protected by password, but the password itself is on your disk, so you can also use it if you want. It's only readable by the user who did so, but it's also important. And you see the first signed certificate. You see the certificate request directory is empty because it removes requests as soon as they have been signed. And more or less, that's it. This one is a little bit a mixed screenshot, but it looks more or less like this. Same thing on the agent. So I'll not do this live, but it works like this. I can run an agent. You can try this out. You can, if you pass different var or SSL directories on command line to Puppet agent and Puppet master, you can do tests like this without polluting your var directory or your directory of the real Puppet master. So you can play around. You can run multiple Puppet masters with different vardios on the same box and so on. Everything you can do in the configuration file can be used as a command line parameter. I guess you all know those basic commands. Puppet cert list shows me all certificate signing requests waiting to be signed. So as soon as an agent connects to my master, the request is sitting there. An agent usually connects to the master every half an hour. That's something we learned about today. As soon as it doesn't have a request, it does so every 2 minutes. So you do not have to wait half an hour to sign a new agent. The agent connects, creates its own key, sends the request to the master, and the master does nothing. It stores the request and that's it. You can manually sign it on the command line. You can use the enterprise frontend, see, oh, that's new nodes. You click there, and every other frontend, of course, also allows you to sign them. Internally, they just do Puppet search sign, or they use the Puppet API, the REST API, and you can remotely tell the master, please sign that certificate. You can revoke them. You can delete them, or you can use just command line tools and wipe them from your disk. If something goes wrong, usually Puppet gives you good hints on command line, telling you about, well, wrong certificates, names not matching, and so on. It's today pretty easy to troubleshoot such problems. It's important to know where your SSL dir is. So on the slide before, I just used the current directory, because I didn't know where the dir is. To find it out, you can use the config print parameter. That's great if you use it in your custom scripts. To delete all certificates, just use Puppet master or agent ---- config print SSL dir. Use this in a subshell or to get a variable and script whatever you want to clean up something, to fix heartbleed bugs, and so on. You should not hardcode paths to SSL directories, because they may change someday. Think about permissions. If your Puppet master is running as, let's say, the user Puppet or ppuppet or something like that, then those files will have different permissions. You shouldn't run those tools with root, because it may happen that Puppet is no longer able to read them, or the other way around. It's also, there are some differences if you run, let's say, Puppet with passenger or Puppet master just in the foreground. Because one of them might have the certificates in your home directory, in a hidden Puppet directory. play around with this to find out how it happens or how it works, or just configure it. Hard code your var and SSL directories to your Puppet conf files, and you're fine. And you should, or it absolutely makes sense to use different SSL-based directories for your agent and your master. Puppet is able to handle this in a pretty cool way if they're working in the same directories, but to make your life easier, separate them. Because on every master, you're usually also running an agent, and they should not interfere. Yeah, I can dump certificates with OpenSSL itself, so these are real raw SSL certificates that Puppet is using. And you can also use Puppet.print as doing exactly the same thing, and you get some plain text details about your certificates and can have a look at them. You can, I don't know how many of you know about this, you can store custom data in your certificates. So the X.509 standard in version 3 allows you to add custom extensions to your certificates, and you can generate a YAML file for Puppets. Maybe if you have a scaling environment, you're sitting, no one here works with Amazon EC2 instances, something like that. But if you do, or if you auto-scale, then it could make sense to generate such a YAML file and store custom data there. You could, for example, write a pre-shared password to tell the master, yeah, I have something valid, so please sign me automatically, if you trust it. You can store information about which zone, with which location this node is sitting. You can, everything written directly in the certificate is something you can trust. Because this information can only be changed before the certificate gets signed. So if the agent changes that information, it cannot fool you, because the certificate has been signed with the old information. Usually, you cannot really trust facts. As, someone could fool you and tell you, hey, I'm a database server, and if you just do configuration based on facts, then you could ship sensitive information to the wrong node. And with something like this, you can be sure that at least the facts written in the certificate can never be changed. That's one way of doing it. There are other ones. Okay. Who is using MCollective? Cool. MCollective is a very powerful tool. We heard about it today multiple times. It's for live orchestration. So here it goes, well, the same rules as for Puppet apply. If you own MCollective, you own everything. MCollective is pretty cool. You can create certificates and permissions in a way that some users with their certificate can only execute specific commands on specific nodes. So your help desk you could give your help desk a tool to reboot your servers, restart some services, something like that, and nothing else. Something like this works in a very secure way. But if you use MCollective, you really should study how it works. So Puppet Labs has a very good website documenting all the security features, and you should study those guidelines. You really should study those guidelines, and once you did so, study them. But you want to understand this. On a Puppet enterprise installation, everything is done automatically. There are a lot of Puppet modules, also on the Forge, that configure MCollective out of the box automatically, some of them in a very dangerous way. So if you're using MCollective, please try to understand how this works. Documentation is very, very good, but you have to sit down to understand which certificate allows you to do what. I've also seen environments where they distributed certificates to all nodes, allowing to authenticate themselves, but configured everything in a way that every single certificate, in theory, had the permission to administrate all the others. This is something that should not happen. But, therefore, you need some homework to get this done right, but you really should do this. Those tools are very powerful, but also dangerous. Have a look at those existing Puppet modules. Have a look how they do it, get inspired by them. If you use MCollective, please try to build it on your own. So even if it's a dirty module written just in a hurry, please try to configure MCollective yourself, just to get an idea, get a feeling on how it works, and on how all those security settings are configured. Because the day you are going to have a problem or a new heartbleed bug appears or something like that, then you should be sure to understand what's going on. Well, you could always use the Puppet support if you're an enterprise customer. Also, well, you could call NETWAYS. Yeah. But believe me, you want to understand this part. Next thing, the REST API. Puppet uses for all its requests HTTPS. So it's a special port, but all it does is open a URL, send something there, and fetch data. So this is what an agent does. This is what happens when different components in the Puppet environment talk to each other. And so it's all a web application. You can run the Puppet master in the foreground. That's what I did before. Fabric in production, you usually use Passenger, so that's, let's say, mod Ruby for Apache. And the configuration for Passenger looks like this. It's a default web with SSL enabled, nothing special. You tell the Apache about those files, and yeah, you should create a Puppet module doing this, and then you're done. As it is a web application, it's very easy to talk to it. So you can do a lot of crazy stuff by talking directly to the REST API. You can write integrations with existing software. You can fetch information. You can play around with certificates. All this is accessible via the web interface. So the URLs look more or less like this. You connect to the master by HTTPS. You have to present a valid certificate. You can also sign a certificate just for your custom web application. And then you have to always put the environment in the URL. That's the reason why it was initially a little bit tricky to configure the environment on the master, because they are putting the environment already in the URL they're requesting. And yeah, a long time ago, something like this was also available on the agent. But as running something like this as root is a little bit dangerous. This was deprecated and no longer exists. These are just some example requests. You can fetch catalogs via the REST API. You can fetch certificates. You can fetch files from the file bucket. If you, for example, have a tool looking at your log files, you see an MD5 sum of a file that has been changed and want to automatically fetch that file and store the old one on a different place. You can do whatever you want by talking to the API. You should who tried to fiddle with the outconf of Puppet, or did it change some time ago? Yeah? Uh-oh. You should care about it. They care about the file. It's pretty dangerous. For example, sometimes or historically there have also been some kind of security issues. For example, permissions are done based on node names. Node names are names signed in a certificate, so I'm pretty sure someone telling me that he's the node Thomas is always Thomas. But if there are errors in the URL, and for the report storage, there was such an error time ago, the filter was just saying, well, everybody is allowed to store reports, but they didn't check that everybody is only allowed to store its own report. So everybody could store a report for all the other nodes. Puppet Labs does a very good job at describing all security issues, so you can follow them, you should follow them, but something like this is not going to fix automatically on an upgrade, because this is a config file, and this may not be automatically changed on upgrade. So have a look at the file. And if you create a custom application, generate a certificate, being allowed to do more, all you need to do is just generate a rule and say, well, my custom web application is allowed to do everything, and then you can write a custom tool or script, whatever, that talks to that API and remotely configures or interacts with your Puppet master. That's pretty cool. This is an example how this could be done in a shell script. So I wouldn't do it like this, but it works that way. So I run curl. It's a long command, as I have to provide my certificates, I have to know about the CA, and I have to provide my private key. I have to tell in the header what kind of format I want to fetch. So let's say YAML, JSON, or PSON. And then I talk to the Puppet master, and for example, here I fetch the facts for a specific node through the API. That's it. if you run distributed setup, and with distributed I mean running multiple Puppet master, scaling your Puppet master. This is a screenshot or an image from a old Puppet training. It was called the Puppet Advanced, so right now we have the Puppet Architect, but it's more or less the same. This is what the environment looked like at that time. It changed a little bit. And as for our exercises, what we did is every student had its own Puppet master running, and there was one central classroom daemon, and we configured a proxy doing load balancing and distributing all the requests to all different student notebooks. It was pretty funny when someone broke the configuration for the others, but this was great to play around and find out how distributing or load balancing a Puppet environment works. And if you have something like this, certificates matter, because if every master has its own inventory of your certificates and its own revocation list and assigns different certificates, then you get a real mess. So what you need to do is tell some masters to not act as a certification authority. Let's just go to your config file and say certification authority false. And then you have to tell all your agents which of your masters is the new certification authority. So you can distribute the whole catalog compilation work on a couple of servers and have just one of them signing certificates. And if that one dies, everything is still working, you just cannot sign new certificates. So maybe you need some failover mechanism also for replacing the certification authority, but you do not need that node for daily production. There's another nice feature. You can configure DNS service request record, sorry, and store the information where to find your Puppet master and where to find your CA and so on in your DNS. This perfectly works. Puppet usually talks just to puppet.yourdomain, or you can also use those records. They are prefixed with -x to tell you that this is experimental. But well, since a long time right now and still working. Since 3.21, you can use intermediate CAs. So if you already are using certification authorities for a lot of different things in your own company, and you have rules telling you that everything has to be below your central root, then you could create an intermediate certificate and sign that by your own CA. And you could also have one CA signing a certificate for your nodes, and another CA signing your certificates for your masters. So you can distribute trust a little bit. And in that case, you have to tell your agent about which CA is the one that's issued master certificates, so they know whether they should trust the master or not. And if you have such a chain, or a chain of trust, then you should also, or you have to tell your Apache about that chain. So you create, like with a normal HTTPS site, a bundled file where you have all your certificates. That's stolen from the Puppet Labs documentation. That's how it could look like. I have my own self-signed CA or my company CA, and got just 2 basic CAs signed from that CA, and one of them is signing certificates for new masters, and another CA is signing certificates for new agents or for agent requests. It just works. So this means if you feel to be, or at least after this talk, all of you are SSL professionals, so you can perfectly do all of the SSL stuff on your own. You can use your own CA. You do not have to use the Puppet CA. You just have to sign certificates. You can manually do everything with OpenSSL minus whatever on command line. It works. There's nothing special about the certificates. Don't fear them. Just get used to them. Play around with them. Security. Puppet Labs, as mentioned before, does a very, very good job when it comes to security disclosures. So remember, or bookmark that link, or make sure to get their latest news always. They publish every single security issue. They let you know how to fix them. You have to read them, because some of them affect you, some of them do not. And this is something you should be aware of. This is also very important for Puppet Enterprise, because there you get everything automated, but you often have to do the updates, because Puppet Enterprise ships you the whole stack, so you do not have to care about Ruby and SSL versions and so on, because they store everything in a separate directory. But that means that they have to do a lot of work to upgrade all their components. So if we have the new Heartbleed bug, it's not enough to upgrade your system. You also have to upgrade Puppet Enterprise, because there may be OpenSSL library sitting in there. So take care about this. Yeah, thanks to Heartbleed, we got a lot of new documentation floating around, explaining us how to work with those certificates, how to troubleshoot them. Just Google for Puppet and Heartbleed, and you can find those links. They explain you how to regenerate certificates, and so on and so on. There are some misleading blog posts floating around telling you, well, just upgrade it and that's it, or just say Puppet, or say package OpenSSL, ensure latest. That's not enough. It's for an issue as we had it this year. You need to replace all your certificates, even the certification authority. That's an older one. In 2011, there was a bug. The Puppet CA added the Puppet alias name in every certificate, not only for the master, but for all the agents. So this means if you're using Puppet since that time and are still using the same certificates, those people that have not been affected by Heartbleed because they had old OpenSSL versions, it could be that all your agents have Puppet as an alias in their certificate name. And so this means that they could play man in the middle and identify themselves as the Puppet master and configure all other nodes. So it's worth to read about it. It's very interesting, and this is one of the issues where Puppet Labs did a very, very good job to describe all that SSL stuff, and they also have a remediation kit. Oh yeah, here it is. Get inspired by this, for example. There's something like this also for the Heartbleed bug. But by looking at issues like this, you learn more about certificates, and you learn how to handle your whole certificate lifecycle and so on. Yeah. And all this, leads me to the next topic, and that's the certification authority lifecycle management. So we sign certificates, we have to renew them one per day or with every new Heartbleed bug. And this doesn't happen automatically. So the bad news is there is nothing doing this out of the box. You cannot just say, click here, even not in Puppet Enterprise, and say, well, regenerate my certification authority and everything is fine. There was an issue for this. I didn't find it on Jira, so I'm not sure whether they moved it or not. And in theory, we would like to have something like this. When certificates are going to expire, right now they're also telling you about this if you configured your passenger in the right way. So your agent will start to complain and say, warning, my certificate is going to expire. There's something your monitoring should check. That's something that right now also your Puppet agent out of the box is going to tell you. And then you have to do something manually. So you're completely on your own, but there's a lot of information on the web, and you have to create something that fits your environment, but you're not completely alone. One way of replacing a certification authority, let's say Heartbleed bug, or even worse, the certification authority itself expired. That's also very funny. So maybe you regenerate the certificate for all nodes, or doing so every year, and one day you will realize that not the agent expires, but the CA itself. Then you have interest to stop all your agents, throw away their certificates, create a new certification authority with maybe a new name, and then restart all your agent and sign all your certificate signing requests. And you need a tool to automate this, and at that point you cannot use Puppet. So you have to use distributed SSH or maybe MCollective, but pay attention because it makes sense to use the same certificates for MCollective. So you can do this with MCollective, but you have to prepare it a little bit. So you can tell MCollective to move the certificates to a safe place before deleting them and continuing to use the old ones, then do all the Puppet stuff and fix Puppet, and then use Puppet to fix MCollective. Yeah, so it's not so out of the box. It can be done. It can be done in different ways. Or you can just script it and use SSH as you did a long time ago before Puppet. Or you could open a new feature request and tell Puppet Labs, please give me a feature to do this with just a mouse click. Yeah, this is just a couple of commands you could use. So you delete all certificates on the agent, on the master, and so on. But nothing special here. Yeah, as I told you before, get inspired by those old remediation kits. You learn a lot when reading them, or just write your own loop. Try to fix it with MCollective, as I told you, but please carefully. Open a feature request. Or buy Puppet Enterprise and then open a feature request, because then you get to the priority lane. One more hint: if you do not like trouble with expiring CAs and so on, you could set the time to live for a CA to something like 20 years. Do not use something after 2038, but this could lead to trouble. And then you should leave your company in time. By the way, we are hiring. Well, that's it. Thank you. Questions?
Questions?
Oh, yeah.
I have a question, short question. Is Puppet accepting self-signed certificates? And can I use wildcard certificates?
Well, self-signed means I'm going to use a certification authority created on my own. Self-signed certificates for the agents will not work because the subject in the certificate itself is the name of your node. So you could try to create a node called asterisk something. Some components could work, I'm not sure, but you would have trouble to write a node definition in a Puppet manifest, because it could interpret it as a wildcard. So no, there's nothing like this. Do you have a use case for this, or? Okay, no. So there's nothing I can imagine, but no. Now I'm playing around a lot with certificates, but I've found no situation where something like a wildcard certificate would make sense. Because I really would want to know that that node is the node it states to be, and if someone breaks into that node, I want to revoke its certificate, and so I need distinct names, and the only source of truth or trust is my name of the node. So I cannot really trust facts, but I can always write the certificate, the cert name. And so this is something I'm basing my node classification on. So this is something that cannot be wildcarded. Other questions? So you're ready for the drinks? See you over there. Thanks.